Recording in progress.
Welcome everyone to the Radiant Torah, in which we are going to explore the weekly parsha with the light of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov's insights, as well as those of the other tzaddikim. And we are entering shortly the period of the 3 weeks known as the 9 days. Tomorrow's class will explain more about what the 9 days is. But for now, I just want to assure you that if you're going through a lot of pressure and a lot of difficulties and a lot of challenges, don't worry, it is normal for this time. And we'll see that in the parsha, there's a lot of chaos in this week's parsha, a lot of chaotic events, one after the other, as well as a review of previous events. So we're going to get started. It's a double parsha this week. And we're going to start with Parshas Matos. Vayidaber Moshe el Rashi Hamatos Livnei Yisrael lemor. Zehadavar Asher Tziva Hashem. Okay, so Moshe spoke, he gathered obviously, the heads of the tribes of the Bnei Yisrael, saying, okay, these are the things that Hashem has commanded. And he begins specifically with two things. Ish ki yidor neder laHashem o hashava shavua lesor isar al nafsho lo yachel devaro kechol hayotze mipiv yaseh. So if a man takes a neder, a vow to Hashem, or a shavua, an oath to Hashem, to establish a prohibition upon himself, he shouldn't go back on his word, okay, according to whatever comes from his mouth to do so. So what is this idea here? So this idea is like this, that we can make vows and oaths. This is a very strange idea because the Torah tells us we can't add to it. The Talmud tells us specifically you can't add to or subtract from the Torah. However, if a Jew makes an oath, okay, makes a vow or takes an oath on themselves, that's like adding to Torah. So the idea is that we have the ability to co-create our Torah per se with Hashem. Hashem is allowing us in certain instances to make a promise which will enhance our observance of the Torah. Now, Nedarim and Shavuos fall into many categories, okay? And we're not going to discuss all the ramifications of them. However, what I'd like to do is give a quick overview of what these might possibly be. So first of all, again, a person really shouldn't make a vow or an oath unless it's unavoidable. So there are 3 situations when a Jew is allowed to make a vow, provided there's a proviso that the person fully understands the commitment, okay? And there are many reasons today why we are cautioned not only against making vows and taking oaths, but cautioned in the very strongest measure to avoid doing so, not even to make a promise. So when you say, I'm going to meet my friend at noon, you should say, God willing, or bli neder, without a vow, or in some other way qualify that this is up to Hashem. It's not up to us. You're not making a vow. Of course, with bigger things, absolutely. You know, we shouldn't say, I promise to do this and I promise to do that. A contract, which could be considered a form of vow or oath, is very specific and detailed according to Jewish law. And we will not, according to Jewish law, we will not have to have too many variables for a contract that we can predict. Somebody else has to draw the contract for us. As a matter of fact, a contract, often called a shtar, which just means a document, is something we should be leery of. If somebody offers you a contract, the first inclination is to show it to a lawyer. The second inclination should be show it to the lawyer. The first inclination, show it to a Rav. Make sure that the vow or the promise or the oath implied by the contract, the agreement, is something that's halachically viable. That's according to Torah. Because if it isn't, you're not going to have any blessing from it. Okay, or you'll have blessing from it in the long run, it won't be a blessing. So the three situations when it is kind of considered okay for a Jew to take a vow. And again, today we're very cautious about this. We don't do this, especially women, and I'll explain in a minute, is if someone has does a sinful thing, a transgression, and they wish to do teshuvah, okay? So a person could say, I'm going to abstain for whatever that bad thing is, okay? Whatever that is, I'm going to not get involved in it, okay? Also, a person might make a vow, I'm going to give tzedakah, I'm going to give charity in order to alleviate my culpability, or to, I'm not appease, to sweeten the harsh judgment that's coming around. I shouldn't say alleviate culpability, we still have responsibility, but sweeten the harsh judgment that might come about because we have thwarted Hashem's will, okay? And this idea is very, very common that people, when we pledge tzedakah all the time, every day we give tzedakah, right? So we know also, we know that we give tzedakah before holidays. We know we give it every day. We know we give it before we light Shabbos candles and so on and so forth. We take Meiser, we take Chomesh from our income, and we give a lot of charity. However, we should still say, or at least in some way quickly vocalize, Bli Neder. Who knows what will happen, okay? God forbid you should make a promise to give tzedakah, God forbid you should leave this world and not fulfill your promise. That's another reason we're careful, okay? Next of the three reasons why we could make a vow. If a mitzvah shows up at your door, you can say, I'm going to make a vow. I'm going to make a vow to fulfill this mitzvah right away, okay? So sometimes you'll hear about something that's coming up, let's say a trip to Uman, which is a mitzvah to go to Uman, davened by Kivrei tzaddikim, especially Rebbe Nachman, and you might say, I'm gonna do it. Better to say Bli Neder, or actually better to say God willing in an instance like that with a mitzvah, okay? The third reason why people make a vow is because they're under tremendous distress. Hashem, if you save my life, I will be sure to commit to giving Chomesh, 20% of my income to charity the rest of my life. Hashem, if you save my life, I'm going to learn the laws of Shabbat, and I'm going to keep Shabbat. I'm going to keep Shabbos, okay? Now, where do we get that from? That a person who's under real duress can make this kind of vow. So when Yaakov was running away from Esav, he vowed to give a tenth of his income, okay, which is the minimum we give today anyway, Meiser, if he would be returned safely and he would have everything he needed. However, in the story, Yaakov wasn't able to fulfill his vow right away, and he was actually the recipient of a lot of corrections. We could call them misfortunes, because he didn't fulfill his vow. Again, everything Bli Neder, without a vow, everything God willing, I'll do my best, okay? And we have to train ourselves to think like this, because a promise is a vow. A promise is an oath, okay? These are all related concepts. And our obligation as Jews is to understand something more in depth about vows, which I'm going to tell you right now. And that is that we have power with our words. Okay. If you'll just hold on 1 second. Would you mind not being in there? Thank you. Okay. So what we have to understand is that we have, Hashem gives us power. He gives us a little bit of the power of creation with our words. Our thoughts can create our reality. Our words can create our reality. Certainly they can change our reality. And therefore our words are very, very powerful, which is why we want to measure our words. Okay. We don't want to blurt things out. We don't want to say, oh, I love that dress you bought. It's so gorgeous. I'm going to buy one for every member of my family. No, don't make that promise. Say, God willing, if I'm able, I'll try. You know, I'll tell you, this idea really comes into play with giving charity, giving tzedakah. You might say, oh, I'm gonna give, I want to get, and then not. Okay. You forget, we're human. Okay. During Yizkor, okay, we pledge to give tzedakah in the name of the deceased. I can't tell you how many times I almost forgot. I have a new formula now. I always say bli nader, which is in the text anyway. And I also say, if for some reason I forget, the next time I give tzedakah may be in that person's merit. We have to be careful with this because our words are engineering, they're engineering a potential action. Okay, a potential action from the universe as well. Okay, now what I want to do is there's so many interesting things in Breslov on this topic. And I'm going to begin by saying that Rebbe Nachman, you might have read in a few places that Rebbe Nachman says, oh, you can take a vow. It's okay, you can take a vow. So the idea is that this was really for people who have full knowledge of the ramifications of a vow. And I think that today we have to take that advice, especially as women, with some caution, because a woman technically, okay, is someone who is verbally more impulsive. A woman and a child are verbally more impulsive than a man. If you want to argue with me, you can, but it's the truth. This is the way we're built. Remember, we have, when Hashem handed out speech, we got 9/10 of all the speech in the world. Okay, this is what we do. We talk. Okay, hopefully we listen to. So the idea is that a woman, as long as she's a girl or young woman or older woman living at home in her father's home, she's not married. If she makes a vow, okay, and her father finds out about it, he can annul the vow the day he hears about it. The same if she's married to her husband. These are the Torah laws. Her husband can annul the vow the day he hears about it. If he decides to annul it later, there's a problem. So how does this play out in real life? So sometimes a woman will make a vow and then regret it. She'll tell her husband about it, and he has the power to annul it. However, beyond that, outside that specific sphere of a woman, her husband or her father, beyond that, what we end up with is the problem of getting vows annulled. And it's a whole legal issue. It can be done, by the way. Okay. So if you need to have a vow annulled, you can text me and I'll tell you how to go about doing it. Okay. Now, it's so interesting what the Rebbe says. So when a person, so I described that when a person, I read the Torah, the pasuk, when a person makes a vow to Hashem or takes an oath, okay, to prohibit himself from something, he must not go back on his word, okay, and he must do everything he said he was going to do. So what Reb Noson tells us, okay, is that the idea of vows and the laws are really unique in all of Torah, because a vow makes a permitted item forbidden, okay? And Reb Noson says it's as if a person exercises his own power to write his own Torah, okay? And I described before about co-creating. This is even stronger. Why? Everything in life draws its essence and its energy from the Torah. And when a person, okay, takes something that's permitted, okay, and turns it into something, he is applying a Torah law, which is the law of vows, to make it prohibited. It's as if he's writing the Torah for himself. Now, again, this is only when it's totally in line with Torah, and there has to be some awareness as well, because a person who makes a vow to do something terrible, obviously, this is not in line with Torah. He's not writing a Torah. He's writing his own destruction, but he's not writing his Torah. Okay, now, a vow can be nullified only by, okay, rabbanim, only by rabbis, okay, and I told you before there's details about it, and that's because only they know the source of the vows. Now, today, I don't know if the rabbis who sit on this particular type of judgment know the Kabbalistic mystical sources, but they certainly know the legal sources of the vows. And therefore, with their wisdom, they're able to find a way to annul it, okay? It's so interesting that this is in this parsha, this whole section on vows. So this idea is that with vows, we can increase our purity or increase our impurity. How? So it's really interesting. The Avnei Nezer explains that Rabbi Yonah teaches that a person who is very cautious to not engage in any forbidden speech, okay? What is forbidden speech? Immediately we can say a falsehood, a lie, a unkind word, bad language, vulgarities, and so on and so forth, heresy, obviously. Anybody who does that, they transform their mouth into a vessel like the vessels in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, that's how holy a Jew can become when they perfect their speech. Okay, now we know that Rebbe Nachman spoke about sanctifying all the openings of the face and head. Okay, we've spoken about it before, we'll speak about it again, but specifically with the mouth here, because this is the Torah-Parshat with vows. And it says that the sacred vessels which were used to make the offerings holy, okay, that is the way a man's mouth can take something prohibited or whatever and infuse it with sanctity. And we're going to talk more about vessels later on in the parsha, which is why when I discovered what the Avnei Nezer said, I thought it was so interesting. So this idea is that we take something that is potentially profane. For example, we take, let's say, the engagement in something that we want to do, and we prohibit ourselves from it, or we vow to do something positive, okay, like we were talking before about giving tzedakah, and with our mouths, we are creating sanctity. We are making sanctity palpable and real. We are, in a way, turning our mouths into a vessel of purity. And the words of a Jew, okay, are not allowed to be profane. We're not allowed to lie. We're not allowed to say harsh words. We're not allowed to gossip, whatever. We all know the list. The list is endless. Why? Because we are vessels for Hashem. And like the rest of us, our mouth has to be a vessel for Hashem. Okay. And the idea is that what do we do with our mouths? What were our mouths designed to do? To sing Hashem's praises, to pray, to administer kindness in this world, okay? To reveal Hashem's glory in this world. And if we're going to make a vow that we can't keep, break a promise, we are making our vessel impure. If we're going to make a vow that we really can keep and we're able to fulfill it, we are making our vessel pure. Okay, we're sanctifying it. And we have to work at this our whole lives. It's not like before and after done. This is something that's constant, okay? Constant. And by the way, I want to say that this prohibition against vows also includes email, letters, writing. You want to be careful in writing as well, because it's a kind of verbalization. It's just written. Okay. So this idea of the vows will get echoed a little later in the parsha. Right. I'm going to skip that because I see we've moved along and I want to make sure I get to everything. So that's the first part of the parsha. It's about the vows. Okay. And I've explained the laws and neder and a shavua. Okay. So next we have in the parsha a war waged against Midian, the Midianites, which we've been speaking about the past few weeks. And the Jews were required, excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay, I just had somebody text me for a link and I can't get it to them now. So the Jews were required to wipe out Midian. Okay, but they didn't. They brought back the women and the children and the booty from the war. Okay. And this was a big problem. This was a problem because the Midianite women were the ones who, if you will recall last week and the week before, who were the ones that enticed the Jews to sin. They were the seducers. Okay. So why don't they get wiped out too? They were supposed to be. Okay. The problem is being merciful in instances where we shouldn't be merciful. Okay. This is not the usual problem we have today. I would say that today a lot of people need to connect more with their mercy and compassion than the other way around. However, there are instances where we have to draw that line. And this wasn't done. And Moshe got very, very upset. Okay. And what happened was that now the Jews the children of Israel had to take the vessels, the booty, okay, that they got, especially the utensils used for food, and they had to purify them. And they had to purify themselves because there was a battlefield and they were around corpses. So the laws of impurity pertaining to vessels are explained briefly in this parsha. Okay, so you would think that Moshe would explain them. Moshe was the one who received the law. However, Moshe wasn't able to explain them. Why? Why wasn't he able to explain them? He got so angry that he lost his wisdom. And therefore, Elazar had to give over the laws in his stead. This is a really important point. Moshe, the greatest tzaddik, got angry, righteous indignation. He was righteously angry. There's no doubt about it. They did the wrong thing. They let the people who were their enemies, who were all about killing every Jewish soul through seduction and all kinds of things, they let them live. Okay? They let this impurity come back to the camp. And Moshe had every justification in the book. If there was ever a cause for righteous anger, this was it. Yet he lost his temper. And the Torah tells us, the commentary tells us, he lost his wisdom. He lost his ability to think clearly. He lost his ability to give over halacha. He lost his ability to reason, to be rational. Okay, so it's I want to find the comment on this that I thought was really a very powerful one. So when we get to purifying the vessels for the vessels that they got, that they collected, the booty that they collected, we have to understand what we're purifying against. Okay, so Moshe got angry and Eleazar had to give over the laws of purifying vessels. Okay, why did we have to purify the cooking vessels? What was the possible reason for that? Okay, they were used with unkosher food. Okay, but they were going to cook kosher food. Why does a vessel retain impurity? Why do our mouths retain impurity? Why does a pot have to be kosher? Okay, because with food, we are going to be putting food in our mouth and in our bodies, which are supposed to be a vessel for Hashem. And if the vessels that we prepare the food in aren't kosher, okay, that's the first line of defense against an impurity. All right. And the anger that Moshe experienced was also a form of impurity, and therefore he wasn't able to give over this law. So this is a really interesting concept. Now, for many of you, if not most of you, or all of you on this call or on this Zoom, you know that if you want food to be kosher, there are many, many things besides just the food itself being kosher. The kitchen has to be kosher. Most foods have to be prepared by a Jew in order to be kosher. Not all Jews, not all foods have to be prepared by a Jew, but most, okay? The vessels themselves have to be kosher. The pots, the pans, the dishes, the spatulas, okay? Why does everything have to be kosher? Why does everything have to be pure? What's the difference? Okay, kosher means appropriate, okay? And therefore, kashrus, okay, the ability to keep kosher and the way in which we keep kosher comes from a very physical process, all right? There may be mystical reasons, or certainly layer upon layer of mystical reasons, but the process itself is physical to make something kosher. You slaughter an animal in a kosher manner. You don't mix meat and milk. Excuse me 1 minute, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm sorry about that, guys. So this idea is that kosher is, there are physical things we do to make things kosher, foods kosher. There are physical things we do to make vessels kosher as well, okay? So in order to make a vessel kosher, certain vessels that became unkosher, let's say through heat, have to be heated to a high temperature to burn out the impurity, the unkosher taste, the unkosher flavor. Okay, and there are various rules how we make vessels kosher. Even countertops are various rules how we make these things kosher. But there's another level that's more directly, openly spiritual, and that's how to make things pure. And that's different, to make things sanctified. So a vessel, a pot or pan from the Midianites, or used in a non-Jewish kitchen or a non-kosher kitchen, okay, retains a semblance of impurity. This is a little bit different than kosher, but I really want to explain this concept because it's so important, okay? Because sometimes we use these words, we use kosher to mean fit, we also use it to mean pure. That's just colloquial usage, okay? When we have a vessel, okay, that has been used for the purposes of gluttony, stuffing one's face, the preparation of foods that aren't fit for a Jew. Okay, I'm not talking about the actual physical imprint on the vessel. I'm talking about the spiritual uses of that vessel. When that is used in that way, it must be purified a different way. Okay, and the way that we purify or sanctify a vessel is first we make it kosher, okay, whether through heating, whether through boiling and pouring boiling water, and so on and so forth. There are various ways for various types of vessels. Some vessels can't be kosher, and so, like earthenware, whatever. That's a whole class. But the spiritual sanctification occurs when a Jew takes a vessel and dunks it in a mikvah. Okay, that doesn't make it kosher per se. It sanctifies the vessel. We call it toveling. You may have heard the term tovel. Okay, we immerse it in a mikvah because we are about to do something very holy with that vessel, which is why if you go to an unkosher restaurant, but order something nominally kosher, okay, and that may very well be kosher, okay, it's going to be used on vessels that were used in a manner that wasn't sanctified. And therefore, the item becomes not only unkosher, but it becomes impure in other ways as well. Because a Jew is supposed to eat in order, why? To take that energy we get from eating and serve Hashem. On Shabbos, we're supposed to eat and enjoy the food and to take not only the energy, the calories, because that's what energy is, to serve Hashem, but even the good taste to serve Hashem with. Okay. So there's more to the picture than just being kosher. There's a level that's deeper and richer, which is being sanctified. Appropriate, for sure. If a Jew eats something unkosher, the spiritual vitamins and so on and so forth in it aren't going to connect with their spiritual body, so to speak, with their soul. It's not going to nourish the soul. But if a Jew takes a vessel that's unkosher, that's unsanctified, it taints the food with a kind of impurity. Now, what do you do? What are all the details of this? So we know that there are many laws about this. If you're interested, every now and then I teach a class on this topic, a class on koshering vessels and a class on toveling. You could also look up online, okay, the details. But I want to be clear that the reason why this is in this parsha is because the whole parsha is in so many ways learning about what it means to be a Jew. And what it means to be a Jew is to have a commitment, not only to doing what's kosher and appropriate for a Jew, but a further commitment to sanctifying ourselves. Okay. Rebbe Nachman, he teaches a lot about eating. He teaches a lot about the three big taivas, the three big desires and lusts. There's food, there's money, and then there's intimacy. Those are the three big lusts. And we can't think that because we're committed to being perfectly kosher in the physical aspect, that we can then use our vessels, our home, our mouths for things that aren't sanctified. And this is a real, I don't know anybody who explains it better than Rebbe Nachman. And there's some terrific lessons on it. There's some terrific shiurim online. I know that Mayor Elkabaz, when we were with Breslov campus, which unfortunately closed a couple of years ago, he did a whole series on Rebbe Nachman and eating and food. You can find that on Vimeo. Okay, you can go, I don't know if the whole series is there, but most of it is. But Google Mayor or go to Vimeo and search for Mayor Elkabaz or Breslov campus. And also you can go to get Rabbi Kramer's book, Anatomy of the Soul, which explains very powerfully about our digestive system and eating. And it explains a little bit about the differences between kosher and the kedusha, the differences between appropriate and holy, okay? Differences between physically kosher and correct and right, and holy and sanctified. And this idea might sound to the rest of the world like, wow, look at those people. They think that they're different than us. They set themselves apart, okay? Or if they're a little bit cognizant, they say, well, Hashem set them apart, but we don't like it. They're people just like us. Why aren't they able to break bread with us? Why aren't they able to take our daughters? Like the Midianites knew that that was going to destroy a Jewish soul. Yet, it wasn't necessarily a terrible thing for the rest of the world. I mean, out and open promiscuity is, but anybody could marry a Midianite except a Jew, okay? So the idea is, yes, Judaism is not universalist. Kashrus is not universalist. During the 3 weeks is the perfect time to really think about this. We are set apart, and our laws, the laws that Hashem gave us and that Moshe handed over to us, and in this case, Elazar, okay, these laws set us apart. These laws said, you have a different purpose here than going and sitting and hanging out, having a glass of wine, having some appetizers with your buddies who aren't Jewish, who aren't keeping kosher. We have a different purpose when we eat. It doesn't mean that there's a superiority that's different. It means that our mission and our purpose is focused and specific, okay? Again, this is, I know that many of you here know this, but to hear it framed in these terms, that Judaism isn't a universalist practice, okay? It's not. And does that make us a people set apart? Yes, it does. Absolutely. Hashem tells us that we are essentially all his priests, all his kohanim, all of us. And the idea is that it really is more responsibility. You know, when it says, when we were called the chosen people, okay, what does it mean? What are we chosen for? We're not chosen, okay, to win Nobel Prizes. That's very nice. There's nothing wrong with it, but that's not why we're chosen. And we're not chosen to write great literature. And we're not even chosen to accomplish political victories, okay? We're chosen to reveal Hashem's kavod, his honor and glory in the world. And the way that we do that, how do we do that? Well, you and I can sit and think of many ways how to do it, but the Torah gives us Hashem's plan for us how to do it, okay? So you might think, hold on one second. So you might think that there's this idea, okay? You might think that there's this great idea you have to reveal Hashem's glory in the world, but you're obligated as a Jew who wants to retain their kashrus, their correct, appropriate way of life, who wants to retain their sanctity, okay? You're obligated to make sure that it fits into the structure of Torah. Baruch Hashem, thank God. We have Rebbe Nachman, who beautifully explains to us that each person has a different expression of how to do this, okay? So one person is going to do it through her art, and another person is going to do it through her beautiful voice, and another person is going to do it by being a great cook and making delicious, kosher, beautiful meals for maybe chassan and kalas, for weddings, for grooms and brides who don't have anyone else to make them. the festive meals. And someone else is going to do that by putting her whole heart and soul into her children and teaching them Torah, and someone else, so on and so on. And by the way, there's going to be much overlap and much, and not only overlap, but you're going to find at different points in your life, you're going to have different ways to express this connection. And this connection, by the way, always includes two facets. One is our connection to Hashem, which involves our connection to ourselves, and that's prayer. That's the sanctifying the mouth, which I spoke about before. We're here to sing Hashem's praises and to connect with him and to have a relationship with him and to talk to him and about him. And then the other connection must be through Ahavas Yisrael, helping the Jewish people, loving the Jewish people, expressing that love through the way the Torah encourages us to express it. Okay. So this idea of being different, being a vessel for sanctity, being a vessel for Judaism, being a vessel for your own soul is really a lot to do with the underlying message of koshering these vessels. Okay, someone is, I hear someone isn't muted and it sounds very loud. Okay, so, you know, I want to tell you that there's so many ways to look into these parshas and these lessons in the parshas, but we have to also understand that just as there's kosher, okay, like I said, correctly slaughtered meat, not eating a pig, not mixing meat and milk, not eating shellfish, so on and so forth. And there's that physical aspect of that. There's also the vessels and the purifying of the vessels that comes from that toiveling in the mikveh, the immersion in the mikveh. Okay. We immerse our silverware, we immerse our coffee pots, so on and so forth. Okay. So we have the physical and the spiritual, and the same with the parsha. We have to learn the pshat. We have to learn the stories in the parsha. We have to learn the simple interpretations and understandings, which, by the way, aren't always so simple. Okay, even the pshat doesn't mean the literal. Okay, and then we have to have that extra added mystical oomph to really understand what we're doing here, because otherwise you're going to have a collection of very fascinating and even relevant stories that are going to give you the structure and the physical aspects, but you might not have, okay, the inner motivation to really understand what we're doing, to think deeply about what we're doing. Okay, so let me see. Okay, now, what time is it? Okay. We are going to, so next, okay, I'm going to talk about how the land was divided up briefly. Okay, we're going to skip an aliyah. The tribes of Reuven and Gad were very wealthy. If you remember in Bamidbar, we spoke about the wealth was measured in cattle. Cattle in general includes sheep, lambs, goats, cows, whatever. And they were discussing which portion of land they wanted, and they wanted the eastern lands, okay, because they had a lot of pasture there. The eastern lands were not, they were all Israel, but they were east of the Jordan, basically. And this eastern bank, even though it was Israel, wasn't as holy as the West. Okay, so Moshe was really upset with them. He was angry again, and he said, look, you know, what you're doing is you don't want to enter the land of Israel proper, and you just want to go to the east because you don't really want to participate in the Jewish people's legal occupation of the land, of the inhabitant of the habitation of the land. And Reuven and Gad, okay, they're their leaders, their tribal leaders, said, look, here's what we'll do. we'll leave our cattle, some of our cattle and our families behind in this eastern portion, and we're going to go into Israel and join everybody in this conquest of the land. So what's going on here? So they wanted to hedge their bets, Gad and Reuven. Okay, they wanted to keep their cattle and their wives where there was going to be no war, but they themselves, they would take the men and they would go join the rest of the Jewish people in Israel to fight. So they were partially committed, but they were very concerned about their wealth and their possessions. And it's true, the safety of their women, but they were very concerned about their wealth. The rest of the Jews were coming with the cattle and everything right in Israel. They knew it was going to be a big balagan. There was going to be war. There was going to be a lot of issues. And Gad and Reuven were like, let's just protect our money. Okay. So this is really interesting. Okay. I want to find this little section here because it is so interesting. Okay. So what is going on here? So Gad and Reuven are saying that they feel that they want to really keep their roots outside Israel for the sake of their wealth. All right. Now, the issue is that they feel that the traveling itself is going to protect their wealth. They're going to go, they're going to fight their war, and their wealth is going to sit back over on the east and build. So the Midrash tells us that money itself is the concept of mobility. It actually sounds like something Rebbe Nachman would say. Maybe he did somewhere. Money itself, actually, I know he did somewhere, is meant to travel from one hand to the other, from one person to the other, okay? From one bank account to someone else's bank account, from your bank account to the electric company's bank account. Okay, money is meant to travel. And the names, the Hebrew names related to money, reveal its mobility. So the first name is Nechasim, which is wealth by possessions. Okay, why Nechasim? So Nechasim is the clue that after a person's passing, his belongings are concealed from him. When a Jew leaves this world, when anybody leaves this world, we don't have access to our money, the cattle, whatever. Okay. My husband always says, Moishe always says, there are no pockets in Tahrichim. There are no pockets in burial shrouds. There really aren't, because you can't take anything with you. So that's the first mobility. Okay. The next name for money is Zuzim. We all know this from the Pesach Seder, right? Chad Gadya. So Zuzim, Zuz means like Zeriz is like a movement. Zuz is to move, to run, to move. And Zuz is a type of coin. And this gives us the hint that even while a person's alive, his money's going to be changing hands. It's going to move all around. Okay. Next, Mammon. Everybody knows the word Mammon. Okay. Mammon, it says the Midrash, is a contraction of Ma'ata Moneh. Okay. What are you counting? What is that? It's nothing. There's no what there. There's no there, as they say. Okay. What are you counting? You're counting coins. What are coins? What do they really mean? Especially today with no gold standard. Okay. Which is just really has put paper money on a very precarious edge. What are you counting? Okay. Next. Ma'os. Ma'os hints to ma'la'es. What about the future? Money isn't an eternal possession. Again, going back to there's no pockets in Tahrichim, as my husband says. It's not an eternal possession. Okay, it's not the future. You know, people have this sense that, oh, I'm set for the future. I made this much money. I'm set for the future. We don't know what Hashem's going to do. We don't know what will be in this world. The only thing that we really have for the future is the next world. That's our future. The next world after we leave this world, after 120, please Hashem. And then the next world in terms of the redemption and Mashiach and the world and the Geula. Okay. So this idea is that money moves. God and Reuven figured that they were going to keep their money in one spot, and they themselves would travel to protect their money. That's actually something Rebbe Nachman teaches, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But we briefly mentioned the Geula and Mashiach, which is so important, of course, in every parsha in the Torah. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you, and I'm going to give you a link. Let me get the link. Okay, let's see if I can do this speedily so I don't hold everyone up. Here in the chat is a link to the new updated Mashiach book. So those of you who already have received a copy of the original Mashiach, Hope for Turbulent Times book, this is a new updated version. It's available on Amazon. It is a larger format because some people wanted a bigger font, a bigger text so they could read easier. So it's like a regular size small paperback. And there's also a digital version. And I finally, Baruch Hashem, went through it with a fine-tooth comb yesterday morning. And now it's available on Kindle. Okay, and it has both versions have a new introduction, some revisions and corrections of the test, or refinements of the test, let's just put it that way. And the digital version has a lot of tools you can use to jump around and see notes and so on and so forth, if you've ever used Kindle for a nonfiction book. So that's available to you very, very inexpensively. I think the digital right now is $2.99. Okay. So if you want it, it's there, and tell me what you think of it. I'd love to hear your feedback. Now, the next thing on our agenda for today is the next parsha. Excuse me, I seem to have lost my video. There we go. And the next parsha is Matot-Massei. Okay. So Matot-Massei is, I don't know, to me, it feels like one of the most mysterious, wonderful parshas in the Torah. And the reason it does is because I learned commentary many years ago on this, the commentary of the Ben Ish Chai, which I don't think it's been translated into English, but maybe it has. So you can Google Ben Ish Chai and Parshat Massei and see if you can find it. So what's in Matot-Massei? So what's in here is the travels of the Bnei Israel. That's what's in there. And the people who went out of Egypt, according to their groups, under the leadership of Moshe and Aaron. And Matot-Massei is an elucidation of the 42 travels of the 42 stations that the Jews went through. And we have to understand that the 42 times the Jews made camp, settled in, remember they had to quickly pick up camp and move 42 times. Some places they stayed just like a day or two. Some places they stayed a year, but they never knew when they had to pick up. This represents our service of Hashem. A Jew, there's another expression my husband always says, a Jew is never set. We're never set. Oh, I got that done. I'm set. I'm set for life. No, we always have to pick up and move. Sometimes this means physically. Sometimes most often it means spiritually. It means we've achieved something spiritually, and now we can't rest on our laurels. We can't say, I'm done. I'm 10 out of 10. No, it means we have to get up. We have to pick ourselves up and go to that next spiritual level. This is a constant evolution of each and every person. And it's a constant sense, going back to previously with the money, of always moving. Our money moves and we always move. And if we don't move physically, we move spiritually. We move from one level to the next, hopefully always upward, though we know we often fall. Okay, then we just pick ourselves up and we move again. So the Rebbe Nachman says something really, he says so many things about this. Reb Noson actually says, the Jews' travel in the Midbar enabled them to tread upon the klipot, the klippas. What are the klippas? These are the husks left over from the creation. These are the negative energies, okay? And what are they represented by? They're represented by snakes, serpents, and scorpions, which we know were in the desert. And these klipot appear to each person in the form of the fears that he experiences. And if a person elevates his fear, corrects his fear, and only has fear in Hashem, he can then squash and tread upon the snakes, scorpions, and serpents of his fears. He can crush them and tread upon them just the same way the Jews went through the desert, treading upon these animals, so to speak. They didn't actually, hopefully, walk on them, but you know what I mean. So this idea is, this is actually from a beautiful lesson of Rebbe Nachman's, Torah 15, in which the idea is we are living in a midbar. We do not know what's coming next. If a year and a half ago, people told you you would spend almost a year locked in your home, you wouldn't have believed them, okay? You wouldn't have believed them. We don't know what we're going through as Hashem is preparing us for the Geula, for Mashiach. And we have to be conscious of elevating our fear to Hashem. And what that means is that Hashem, right now, in the era before Mashiach, and he's been doing it for a while, because it's been the era before Mashiach for a while, don't know what's coming next. There was the tragedy in Meron, the tragedy in Carlin Stolen, and now the tragedy in Surfside. There was COVID, where we lost so many wonderful people, tzaddikim, tremendous people. There's the economic issues. There's the ups and downs of politics and war and allies and broken alliances. So much is flipping all around, okay? We can't be sure of anything. The only thing we can be sure of, the only thing we can have bitachon, trust in, is Hashem. When we trust in Hashem and only have this awesome fear of only Hashem, all the other worries gain perspective. Now, what's so interesting about this is that, at these 42 different stations, I don't know if we'll have time today. I really wanted to talk about the stations themselves. But at these 42 different stations, there were always new challenges, new things potentially for the Jews to fear. New things like Mara and the bitter waters. Okay, that was one station. We spoke about that. So many new and unusual snakes, scorpions, and serpents that the Jews had to face. And how did they handle it? Well, the ones with faith and trust in Hashem got through it. They were able to camp, able to evolve spiritually in the way they were meant to at each location. They were able to pack up and go on to the next spot, truly changed, because each spot they went to had an effect on their neshamas. They were a purifying force, each space, each spot, each encampment. They were an educational force, okay? They were a spiritual force of change. And today, so many of these forces can be found even by people who spent a year locked in their houses and apartments, okay? Because the hint to us is that the changes that we're undergoing aren't necessarily, I have to move from this house to this house to this house to this house. No, the changes are inner, Okay. There's the inner traveling that we do. And if a person today has this intense desire for travel, okay, travel to this vacation spot, travel to that spot, travel here on business, travel there to look at this, travel, whatever that is, they must understand that there is a need to rectify the inner travels. Okay. We have to rectify the inner travels. I have a wanderlust. It's called. I used to love to travel. Okay, but I do. There's still places in the world I want to see. The only place I want to be is Israel, but there's still places I want to see. Okay. I want to show people close to me, like the Alps. I've been there. I want to show somebody. Okay, but still, that comes from something in between me and Hashem. That's coming from this space where I need to work on the inner travels. All of us need to work on the inner travels. I'm not going to be able, unfortunately, and I'm so sorry, I really wanted to have time to go over some of the stations and their meanings, according a little bit to the Ben Ish Chai, but also according to the Midrash. So unfortunately, we're going to not get there this year, God willing, next year. And I hope you all, well, before I say I hope you all have a great week, does anybody have any comments or questions? No? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes. Who's that?
Charlene.
Hi, Charlene. What's your question?
So when Moshe Rabbeinu got angry,
Yes.
he wasn't supposed to?
So I think what you're asking, I'm going to try to rephrase that, is was it wrong of Moshe to get angry?
Yes, because he had a full good reason to.
Okay. So Rebbe Nachman teaches us something really amazing about anger. And by the way, you should know I'm a hothead by nature. I've worked on myself, but I'm still not perfect. Anger is never a good thing, according to our sages. Anger is a form of idolatry. It takes you outside yourself, and it's a wedge between your rational thought and that fire of emotion. And the idea is that even righteous indignation shouldn't be acted upon. Okay, this is through Musar, through Hasidus, it's throughout the Torah. We know that anger is not good. Okay,
But
I'm going to finish. However, there are times where our actions may be prompted by our anger. In other words, I'm going to give you a really silly example because this is a good example that you can apply to bigger and bigger things. Your child runs across the street into traffic and you give them a little slap to scare them. You're giving them a slap so they never do it again. So they understand that this is dangerous and bad and they can't do it. Or even if they don't understand, let's say it's a 2-year-old and they don't understand, you're scaring them, they're not going to want to run again because they're not going to want that little potch. Okay. But if you act out of anger for yourself, it's a negative. If you get angry, okay, and then you act not out of anger, but as a response to the situation, not out of your burning righteous indignation, anger, and so on, then that can be there may be a healthy response. Obviously, each situation is different. But the emotions of anger themselves, look, if you go to a therapist, a modern psychologist, they'll say, oh, all emotions are good. All feelings, you just have to express them. You just have to be in touch with them. So what I want to say here is very important. There may be times if you are so blocked and so in denial about what's going on with you in your emotions. And a lot of people are, by the way. They don't have that awareness. If you're blocked and you need to work through it, you may have to understand and identify what negative emotion you're feeling. And it may be anger. And you may have to work through it by thinking about it, by talking about it with someone, by expressing it in a way, hopefully a constructive way, in order to make sense of it, okay? But the goal is for a Jew to not become angry at all, not to transform our anger into something good, not to express it because psychology says to. The goal, again, we're people set apart. Our goal is to work on ourselves so that we eradicate any trace of idolatry inside us, and anger is considered a trace of idolatry. Now, that's a goal. It's an ideal. Most people in the world, including me, are not there yet. We have our moments. But if you have this consciousness about what anger really is, anger is an expression that you don't like the way Hashem's running the world. Okay. You don't like the way Hashem's running the world, and the way a person, I'm going to get to that hand in a minute, and the way a person responds or reacts to something, even something someone else does, okay, we still have to understand they're an agent of Hashem. This is a whole big class, by the way. I see someone on an iPhone. Charlene, I'll get back to you. Who's on the iPhone? You have a question? I see a hand up. You have to unmute if you want to speak.
Hi, it's Suzanne Steiner.
Hi, how are you? Okay, Suzanne.
I did have a question.
Sure.
I hear. I was just wondering, like, it's so weird hearing my voice. If you say, like Rebbe Nachman, everything is from Hashem, without making it like an excuse for Moshe, like, I mean, that it's from Hashem that he got angry. I mean, ultimately, isn't Hashem the one who let him be angry, quote unquote? You know what I'm saying? Not that there's you know what I mean? Not that, oh, okay, well, I'm angry because Hashem made me be, I mean, on his level, you know what I mean?
So first of all, it's a good question. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute you and answer.
Okay, thank you.
I'll have to go in a minute. Okay. So Suzanne's question is a good one. Well, ultimately, Moshe's anger was from Hashem. Ultimately, the Jews who sinned and made Moshe angry, they brought back the Midianites and the booty that was impure. Okay. The idea is of course, at some basic, deep level, whatever happens is the Ratzon Hashem, is the will of Hashem. It's true. However, Hashem also gives us Bechira. He gives us the power to choose. He gives us free choice. Now, Rebbe Nachman's very clear about this. This is a paradox. There is no way we can possibly understand that Hashem has foreknowledge, total control, total foreknowledge on the one hand, and yet we absolutely have free choice because the Torah tells us so on the other. Okay, all the tzaddikim tell us. So what we have to understand is that someone else might act to us in a certain, I'm not going to talk about children because raising children is always different, but someone else might act to us in a certain way that upsets us. It happens. Okay, we're human. And we might be upset, but if we are able to understand that they are just an agent of Hashem, we mitigate our negative emotions. Okay, this is a good question. Charlene's question's good, your question's good. Maybe we'll talk about it in another class because this is so important, because you can't use this, oh, well, it's from Hashem, so, oh, well, I got angry, it's from Hashem. No, we have free choice, Oh, Hashem's going to decide, not me. No, we have free choice on the one hand. On the other hand, we do have to submit to Hashem's will. But our free choice requires us to do the hishtadlus, to do the actions, and to do them in as righteous a manner as possible according to our level of understanding of the Torah. Okay, everybody's different in this regard. We have to always grow in this. So we can't use that as a cop-out in a way. And Moshe still had free will, and he got angry. Now, I'm not just saying that the way a regular person would. Moshe was the greatest tzaddik. So I don't understand all his motivations, but we're told he had a very human emotion, which I also think is so valuable for us. It's one of the things that makes Rebbe Nachman so special, is that makes Moshe so special, actually, and that is we get to see their process. We get to see their growth. We get to see their missteps. And these were tzaddikim. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest tzaddik who ever lived, the humblest man. We have Rebbe Nachman, a great tzaddik, the tzaddik emes, the true tzaddik of our generation. We have other tzaddikim as well, many others. The idea is that even a tzaddik isn't Hashem. Even a tzaddik has flaws, but anger is absolutely considered a flaw. It is not a positive, even when it's righteous indignation. This is, by the way, coming from someone who's naturally inclined to righteous indignation. I'm working on it. I'm still working on it 10 years later. We work on this. The idea, it's today's mini lesson, if you want to go back to that, was about peace, actually. I'm trying to remember what it was about, but it was about avoiding conflict, not getting embroiled in conflict, not jumping into the fray. This is really important. If you're somebody, I don't know you, Suzanne, but if you're, I know who you are, but I don't know anything about you. If you're someone who jumps into the fray all the time, the pendulum might swing the other way for you. You might have to err on the side of being overly non-confrontational. If you're someone who's totally passive, who lets people walk all over you, that's a whole other thing. I'm not talking about the emotion of anger. I'm talking about standing up for yourself. But in this case, in every case, anger is wrong, the Torah tells us. Can anger sometimes impel us to do something good? Sometimes anger, when we reflect on it and we're no longer in the throes of that emotion, can be a sign to us, an emotional sign to us that something isn't right and we need to fix something. That's what anger is good for. Okay, but beyond that, and usually, by the way, the thing we need to fix is internal, of course. Not always, but usually. So, but beyond that, no. All right, listen, I have to run. I wish you all the best. I hope to see you next week. Next week is during the 9 days. Let's hope the Zoom works, please Hashem. And you can be in touch with me if you have any questions. All right, everyone. Oh, and I didn't say this at the beginning. I really need to thank Dr. Eleanor Gautis for sponsoring this parsha class and all the parsha classes. It's really very wonderful of her to do this, and may it bring bracha, hatzlacha into her home, into her family. Okay, everyone, take care.